Welcome to another edition of Entrepreneurs en Fuego, where we document the journey of amazing entrepreneurs. We document this by creating this digital workbook. And today is a very special day for me because I have with me Beverly Miller-Dastgir. And you have just, what I was telling you, I mean, we could probably be here for weeks and weeks telling stories because you lived overseas and you have the ability of having lived overseas to be able to recognize how we as an American society, and I say this also from my own perspective. I mean, I'm a foreigner that became a citizen here in the United States, but that the world is not just Phoenix, Arizona. The world is just not the United States, but the world is Egypt, the world is Ecuador, the world is Canada, it's Mexico, and it's really big. And so when we begin to realize that we're not alone in this beautiful country of ours, then we start probably becoming a lot more tolerant and understanding about the geopolitical world that we live in.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
Tell us about your journey. Tell us about your story.
My journey.
I mean, you got 40 years to talk about. You've been 40 years in business, and you're an international consultant. So start wherever you want to start. You want to start like, oh, this is what I did this morning. You're going to start 40 years ago.
40 years ago, I was in New York City working for corporate America. And then I got married and went overseas to join my husband in Egypt. So it took on, at that point I became more of an independent because obviously I had other responsibilities to care for as well.
Was that a difficult transition? I mean, had you been overseas before you went to
Yes.
Egypt? So,
Yes.
so you were well traveled, in other words. You were worldly?
Traveled probably 9 or 10 countries at that point.
Okay, so it wasn't that much of a shock, or was it when you left?
To a certain extent it was, because now you're living as opposed to just traveling and visiting or doing business in a short-term space of time.
And of course, cultures and religions and everything else, was that a shock? I mean, was that hard to adapt to living in
I don't know that it was hard to adapt to, but what it was a learning process for me to come to appreciate different cultures, different religions, different ways of doing things, social structures. Just, living day to day. How does your day go?
So, all right, so how's your day go? So the first year that you were there, was there something that kind of stood out in your mind or in your experience that you can go back and say, son of a gun, I really miss my McDonald's over here, or I really miss the United States. Was there something like that?
I treasure my family, so yes, I missed the interaction with my family on a regular basis because we didn't have internet in those days.
Sure.
Didn't have Skype.
Mm-hmm.
Telephone communication was difficult. So yes, missing family was one issue. But I've had a rich life. I have no complaints.
So when you were in Egypt, now did you travel to other countries while you were there, or
Sure.
did you stay just in Egypt?
Yes, I traveled to other countries.
And so, as an international consultant, now were you working for a corporation? Were you working for yourself?
For myself, I worked for myself, or I had a management consulting company. So either independent or having a company in a foreign country.
So who would call you for your services? What kind of companies would call you for your services?
Well, my professional disciplines that cover accounting, tax, planning, systems, project management, that kind of thing. So I've done a lot of work with small and medium-sized companies because in Egypt in particular, at that time, the government was 80% of the employer of the country. So as it started to privatize some of its holdings, then you had a much bigger emphasis in small business and medium-sized businesses coming up. So as businesses grow, you have some growing pains and you need to kind of look at how things are done, or maybe you don't understand how the accounting gives you surprises at the end of the year. How do you plan for it? Are your systems up to date? They've made a big jump. They didn't have to go through a third generation. They just started with what was on the market. So bringing them up to date and using software to help them with their processes was, basically what was going on. So working with individuals, organizations, small and medium, the problems were different. So it's hard to categorize it because I've covered a lot of different organizations and industry. So
was it hard to break through the cultural ceiling? And by that I mean, look, it is hard enough here in the United States for a woman to break through that so-called, corporate scene. But being in a foreign country, being in the Middle East, was it difficult for you? Did people see you differently? And how did you deal with it?
no, I don't think it was difficult for me because I was married to a gentleman who was very prominent in the banking community, for instance. So he trained basically 30% of the bankers in the country at one point or another. So in terms of that, I was really blessed to have an easy go of it. So the introductions were there. It wasn't really difficult at all.
Did you ever feel some type of apprehension, perhaps, by some of the executives, of the local executives, that, well, we don't really want to deal with a woman?
No, in Egyptian society, it's not that way. They are a conservative society, and traditionally women will do the normal route where they get their education. They may work for a couple years, get married, have a family, and then start a career. So in terms of comparisons between America and here, actually Egyptian society is further ahead because they don't distinguish between male or female.
I didn't know that. So, well, and I think that the fact that, of course, you had the connections, or the introductions, if you will, the doors were opened a little bit easier in that respect.
Very much so.
I've never been to the pyramids.
They're awesome.
You go there every weekend and just stand in awe like Napoleon did when he stood before them?
Well, I used to be there about 3 times a week because I had horses that I rode on the Giza Plateau. So.
Did you look for maybe little
trinkets on the ground?
Trinkets on the ground and things
Not
of
too
that
much,
sort?
no.
No?
No.
Okay.
Others did, but no.
Just a phenomenal culture. Were you? I don't want to use the words overwhelmed, but you're a very well-educated person and you're a world traveler. But I don't care who you are, you must be overwhelmed and humbled by 4,000 years of history before you when you see the pyramids.
I think that's one of the things you learn to appreciate when you travel or live in a different place, is if you're inclined to want to learn about the people and, why do they think the way they do, or why does society have certain rules and regulations or etiquette or protocols. These are things that are, rich in terms of trying to appreciate or understand where people come from.
What is the hardest challenge that you faced in these 40 years of your business life? And I'm sure that you have many of them, but is there one that stands out, Beverly, that you say, this was really challenging and I'm proud that I was able to overcome this particular challenge?
I think the biggest challenge was when my husband passed away. Just that whole process was rather difficult. I had a lot of help along the way, but I would say that was probably the most difficult.
He was your partner?
Yeah, in many ways.
Did you feel like half of you perhaps was lost?
It just was very different. You have to go through the reinvention process.
And you came back to the United States?
After 9 years, yeah.
After 9 years. What's the, is there a place in the world that you visited and you said, yeah, this is kind of like the coolest spot I've ever been?
I would say Egypt, because Egypt is a country, because my husband was an Eastern man, I'm a Westerner, and it's the only place in the world I know where East and West meets and coexist side by side without conflict. So it was a perfect place for us as a couple.
You had the freedom to travel throughout Egypt without any restrictions or anything like that during these years?
Well, initially in the 80s, yes, there were restrictions.
There were.
As foreigners, you had to stay on the main roads. You couldn't venture into the desert land without permission. So there has been changes over the years.
What fuels your fire as an entrepreneur? There's got to be something that gets you up in the morning and gets you going.
Well, I think working with individual organizations and people to basically help them expand their knowledge base and deal with problem solving mostly. Because my skill set is so extensive that basically looking at problems and coming up with solutions. So when the solutions are given and accepted and owned, that makes me feel good.
How did you acquire all this skill set? Because, you know, this program is about entrepreneurs and it's about passing the torch, if you will, or showing other people, showing some entrepreneurs that are out there that want to become an international consultant. How does one become an international consultant? Is that something that you always, that was in your plans? I said, I'm going to be an international consultant.
No.
It's right here on page 3 of my life book.
I don't know that it was a plan to become an international consultant. It was just business is business. Whether you do it here or somewhere else, it's business. So if you have something to do, a problem to solve, you just get on with it and you do it. I mean, I don't think it's any big deal. What gave me the basis is my family had their own business, so I grew up in an entrepreneur family.
Okay.
Then I did corporate America in upper middle management positions. And so when I went overseas, I had a wide range of skill sets with the institutional knowledge that I could pass along. So that's basically what I've been doing, is knowledge transference.
Knowledge transference. What's the best advice you ever got? The best advice you ever got?
Best advice. Be yourself.
And you are. And I love the fact that we are learning from your experiences, and I love the fact that perhaps that's the message that we want to tell entrepreneurs that are coming behind you. Just be yourself. No sense in being somebody else.
Exactly.
I got a little gift for you. The sad thing about this interview is that we only have about 10 to 15 minutes. But I have so many questions about Egypt. Oh my goodness. I'm telling you. This is a shirt that is made by Peaceful Soul, which has the virtues of entrepreneurs.
Okay.
And at least we feel that they are: simplicity, discipline, humility, kindness, and honesty. And I want to pass this along to you. It's just a little memento.
Thank you very much
for being a guest of Entrepreneurs in Fuego, Beverly. And I truly respect what you do, and I truly respect the fact that having traveled the world, it gives you a phenomenal perspective about who we are as a society here in the United States.
This is true. We are a melting pot.
We are a melting pot, and we're going through some tough times right now. Or the rhetoric that is going on right now. So terrible. But we will prevail.
We will.
And I am very proud that you accepted our invitation to be in here.
It's my pleasure.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And with that, we're out.